Okay, I've recorded this video multiple times. I actually uploaded it and I deleted it because I don't think the video is very good. So I'm gonna try to do this video again and try to kind of like make sure my argument is kind of like less everywhere and more concise. So essentially, I want to give art advice because I see this problem kind of everywhere and I kind of want to just talk about it. So if it's very obvious, just ignore the advice. I just think that I run into the problem quite often. So I'm just gonna say it here. The whole advice, the advice as a whole is stop treating all art advice, specifically construction. This is going to be specifically about construction because I see it in most of construction. But stop treating advice that you receive or tutorials you receive as a formula to apply to all drawings. That's really the main point of the video. Because whenever I see people draw construction, they tend to stick to very similar things. At least when artists start out, right? So this is how it usually starts. You start art. You want to draw a person. You usually look online and go, okay, how do I draw a person, right? And typically you are led to construction. Some people are led to gesture drawings. Most people are led to construction, right? And when you watch construction, you usually watch like a Marco Brunet video or something. And no shade on him though. That video is great. Usually his videos are great. They're great places to start off, right? But they're usually generalized advice, and they usually teach you to learn a couple of shapes and then apply those shapes everywhere. You kind of just like, you change things into cylinders, you change things into spheres, you change things into cubes, and you use those kind of everywhere. And the problem is that people tend to apply that construction regardless of the pose, regardless of what they're looking at, regardless of what they're drawing, and they end up running into a lot of issues like, hey, this drawing is very stiff. Hey, I'm trying to draw this dynamic drawing, but it's looking really rigid. And they run into a lot of issues. And then they keep redrawing, retrying, practicing over and over and over and over. But despite the drawing never turning out correctly or turning out a lot undesirable, there's an undesirable outcome. They don't change the methodology. They don't change what they're actually doing. They're still relying on the same construction they learned at the very beginning. They're still relying on typical shapes like spheres, cylinders, and cubes, right? But the problem is that I feel like a lot of artists need to stop taking advice they receive online on the internet or from YouTube videos and applying it 100% the exact same way. And they should be evolving that specific methodology to themselves. They should be molding it and changing it and heavily, like hyper specifying it to what they prefer and what works for them primarily. And I have my own construction here of this drawing right here to specifically explain by pointing out a specific example. Okay, so to better paint my picture, I like to use mostly organic shapes. And when I mean organic shapes, I mean like stuff without straight edges, like no cubes, no rectangles. I only use cubes and rectangles whenever I need a specific direction pointed at it. And because lines typically tell direction a lot better than spheres and circles, right? And that's why I usually draw like lines like this to show where they're pointing, because spheres don't do that on their own. But I like rounder shapes. So I rely on cylinders a lot. You can see a cylinder here, you can see a cylinder here. So why for certain limbs are there not any cylinders? Why do I do construction as a dot and a line here? Well, when you're looking, you don't know, but me, I know that this originally was a cylinder. In fact, you can see that I kind of outline a curve here and I kind of outline a curve at the lower end. If you look on the left side, you can see a curve here and a curve here. You could probably tell based off that this used to be a cylinder that starts from here. There used to be two sides, here and here, and it tapered down towards the knee. So where are the sides? Why do I erase the sides? I specifically chose to erase the sides because when I go and do anatomy, when I start to apply muscles and anatomy onto the thighs later on, and those sides are still there, they remain, I have a very hard time, my brain has a very hard time diverging from those lines. And despite the fact that thighs have a lot of fat on them and they're a very organic shape, they curve a lot, I have a hard time diverging from that line, and my thighs end up very stiff. But by removing that line after the fact, after I've done the construction and removing it, I am more free to draw curves and make them rounder and add a lot more fat to the thighs because I'm not limited by a line. And to you, that might make no sense. Why is an imaginary line on a digital tablet keeping you so limited and restricted and drawing thighs naturally? Because your brain works differently. Your brain works differently. You have a different type of language, shape library in your head, and you probably do construction slightly differently, right? And what I'm trying to paint the picture is my construction is hyper specified to what works for me specifically in my brain. There is a bunch of formulas that I've read, I've watched. I have a Morpho book right here that does not work for me at all that I spent $16 on. And I've taken all the advice that I've accumulated, and through trial and error and through evolution, I have come up with a specific set of construction that works only for me and works for my mind, that makes a lot of sense, right? What I see other artists trying to do is that once a specific set of construction that they learned from someone else doesn't work, they merely go online to try to find a new methodology that works for that specific artist that they have made themselves, and they try to seamlessly copy it, expecting there to be a transition that's one for one and for it all to make sense. But that doesn't work that way. You really have to find a specific set of instructions, a specific method that works for you. And if it doesn't work for you, then mold the best one that's closest for you and mold it and make it your own. Because viewing art advice as a formula to be applied in every single scenario, every single pose, every single position, every single perspective just doesn't work. It's just not how that works. Advice generally is not applied to everyone in the same way. That's like handling a specific patient the same way you handle another patient, another patient, another patient. That's how I kind of view it. All advice is specific, and it's all specific case scenarios for every single person. And hopefully that like thigh construction just shows how I think differently. Because someone else might just do a cylinder and call it a day. Some people might not even do anything. Some people might just draw the hip with a circle for the round for the rear end, and then just create a line from the knee and then connect the dots, and that they call it that's pretty much the hip and the thigh for them. A good example is the torso. The torso changes so much. The torso being the chest and the hip, they change it drastically. I know if you watch Chomeng, you probably know that he does a very 3D rigid trapezoid prism thing, and he does cutouts for the legs and the front. And he uses a circle for the top. Some people, like a lot of comic book artists I know, use a light bulb because for males, the chest is usually really big and huge, and it usually tapers off towards the waist, giving them a very slim but bulky look. And then if you ask certain other artists, they might use a peanut shape, like a sandbag peanut shape, and that just doesn't work for me. Those methodologies, no matter how hard I try to implement them into my own process, will never work, either because I don't like them or because it just does not click in my brain for me. And so I think artists that are trying to get better at art, should view all advice in that way. It is merely a suggestion that should be taken and then processed, changed, and molded until you like it in a specific manner and order. And that's it. That's how all advice should be viewed, not a formula, not a specific set of instructions that you should follow to a T every single time for every single scenario. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I've used up pretty much all my gym time to do this. So, oopsies. Yeah. I hope you guys like this drawing, by the way. There's going to be a video soon. I think it's going to be a really fun video, so I hope you enjoy. And hopefully you like my rant. Thank you. Bye.